Skyrim is full of betrayal. And no, I'm not referring to any 16 times the detailed Todd Howard type of betrayal, though perhaps he has forgotten the message hidden throughout the stories of his very own game. You see, Skyrim has a theme. And yes, there are many themes we could muse about, from power to freedom to decay or even rebirth, and they'll always overlap, but in my subjective opinion, there is one theme to rule them all. Skyrim is about betrayal, especially the abandonment of one's duty, and of course, the consequences that follow. And while you can't definitively prove its existence delving through game files or using console commands, it is undeniably right under our noses when poring over each of Skyrim's significant stories. Whether a strong message of keep your word and stay true to your duties or else was intentional, I can't say with certainty, but it can definitely feel like it after you've watched this video. Even the extra quests and factions I'll touch on near the end just drive the message home even harder. Whatever the reason, so many groups, figures, and even gods in Skyrim find themselves betrayed. And for those who've been waiting for this proper deep dive since we first spitballed on the topic years ago, sorry about the wait. It was sent into the future by some Nord heroes and an Elder Scroll atop the throat of the world. Skyrim is renowned for such sky-reaching peaks and its frostbitten tundras, but this land is equally shaped by oaths betrayed and duties scorned. And in such a setting, what better hero than the last Dragonborn, wielding the trademark tool of the Dova, the Thum, to be the final word that destroys those who cannot keep their own. It all begins with Alduin, quite literally. Once you're finally awake and captured alongside Ralof, a horse thief, and a gagged warlord, it's not long before you're carted past Helgen's imperial towers and pushed to the chopping block. Before your ancestors can smile at you, Alduin comes and unwittingly ensures his own demise. Flaming meteors rain out of the sky, some Imperials fly into the sky, and the last Dragonborn begins their escape. Whether their trust was placed in Ralof or Hadvar, the Dragonborn is directed to Riverwood and then to Whiterun, where they inform Jarl Balgruuf that the rumors are indeed true. Dragons are in Skyrim, the end times are upon us, Alduin has returned to eat the world. Or so some Nords would have you believe. For thousands of years, they have seen Alduin as a world-eating dragon. Others, especially those with a staunch Imperial worldview, may disagree, claiming Alduin is simply the Nords' version of their chief deity, Akatosh. In fact, Alexandre Simon, High Priest of the Akatosh Chantry in Wayrest, goes as far as saying the two entities are one and the same, and that the primitive peoples of Skyrim failed to understand the goodness and greatness of the Great Dragon, and it was this lack of understanding that formed the basis of what became, ironically, their most impressive creative achievement, Alduin, the World Eater, phantom of bedtime stories, and justification for ancient, if imagined, deeds. While there is an element of truth to what he's saying in regard to Akatosh, Alduin, and Auriel being separate manifestations of one overarching time god, this pretentious priest would be shocked to see that Alduin is clearly far more than a phantom of bedtime stories. He really is a real dragon with flesh and teeth and a mean streak longer than the White River. As the illiterate Thromgar Ironhead wrote in his very own book, Alduin is real, and he ain't Akatosh. He even exists as a separate entity in Khajiit mythology, as Alkarn the Scaled Prince, firstborn of Akka, who bred with a demon of fire and shadow. Most notably, Alduin ultimately distinguishes himself from Akatosh, saying that he is his firstborn. Though this can be interpreted in many ways, we'll take it at face value. At the end of the day, or world in this case, it is not metaphysics, but the tangible manifestation of Alduin that matters for the inhabitants of Nirn.
Alduin will devour all things, and the world will end. Nothing can stop him. I tried to tell them. They wouldn't listen. Fools. It's all come true. All I could do was watch our doom approach.
Playing through the eyes of the last Dragonborn, we use an Elder Scroll to witness ancient history. We see the moment in the Dragon Wars, where Alduin is confronted at the throat of the world by three Nord heroes. It was Paarthurnax who taught them the Thum, betraying Alduin, resulting in them creating the Dragonrend shout they used to subdue him before banishing him, albeit temporarily. But this was not, as Nords might believe, what saved the world from being eaten. It simply halted Alduin's oppression. As far as we can tell, Alduin could have eaten the world if he wanted to back in the late Merethic era, and perhaps should have to fulfill his Kalpa ending purpose. This would have allowed the current cycle to end, so that a new one could be ushered in. You see, the Elder Scrolls universe exists in multiple incarnations, one after the next, known as Kalpas. These are basically cycles, starting at the Dawn era and going all the way up until the world ends, which you could say was supposed to happen back in Skyrim's ancient history, but didn't when Alduin shirked the task set before him. It's a subtlety that the common folk of Skyrim would not be aware of, and who can blame them? Imagine being the, well actually guy to a Nord who just witnessed his family home get converted into a bonfire while his village was slaughtered. Sure, you, a base lore enjoyer sitting at home, know it's technically not the end times, but for the living populace of Skyrim, it may as well be. Instead of fulfilling his duty and eating the world, Alduin simply forced his tyranny upon it, and thus set in motion the events that make the betrayal of duty the preeminent theme of Skyrim. A bit of a main character moment. Leading an army of dragons who saw him to be far more powerful than them, Alduin subjugated the men of Skyrim. They built grand temples to the dragons, forced into submission with the help of dragon priests, essentially men who were elevated to great levels of power for their service, with gear to match. Many ancient Nords pledged their very life to their dragon priest overlords, even in death, becoming the undead Draga you battle deep in so many of Skyrim's ruins. While we can't know exactly what it feels like to be banished into the future, we can assume that from the view of Alduin, an immortal being who exists eternally, there's a good chance it felt like a quick stint in the naughty corner without enough time to reflect on his transgressions. After returning to Skyrim in the 4th era, Alduin starts laying waste to everything, again. Unless we believe that his desires have fundamentally changed since his banishment, then it's safe to assume his thirst for domination remains. For the violation of his metaphysical duty, Akatosh imbues a mortal with the soul of a dragon, sending the last Dragonborn into Nirn to clean house. Whether this is to teach Alduin a lesson and save the world, or destroy him so that his soul can be returned to Akatosh and then come back reprogrammed to actually eat the world at a later date, is something only a god could know for sure, though Paarthurnax does drop hints.
Perhaps this world is simply the egg of the next Kalpa? Lean Vokeen? Would you stop the next world from being born? The next world will have to take care of itself. Rofus, maybe you only balance the forces that work to quicken the end of this world. Even we who ride the currents of time cannot see past time's end. Those who try to hasten the end may delay it. Those who work to delay the end may bring it closer.
Whether the last Dragonborn is merely the pawn of a time-obsessed god, the message is clear. Alduin betrayed his role as World Eater and was punished accordingly. But on a personal level, we should probably be thanking him, as all the amazing lore that transpired in the thousands of years since the late Merethic era, including the events of every Elder Scrolls game, could only exist because Alduin chose not to eat the world long ago. Skyrim's Dragonborn is not the only one of his kind to have existed, hence the designation of Last Dragonborn. It is a blessing said to be bestowed on a select few by Akatosh. Dragonborns are among some of Tamriel's most influential figures, from Riemann Cyrodiil and Tiber Septim to successors with less spectacular reigns, who still upheld Alicia's covenant with Akatosh and kept the dragonfires lit as they donned the mystical Amulet of Kings. Akatosh, the Aedra whose domain is time itself, would most certainly be able to know precisely when Alduin would return, and hence bring about the last Dragonborn to deal with him. Therefore, it is not hard to believe that while the last Dragonborn has been imbued with dragon blood to slay the World Eater, not every Dragonborn who lived throughout the eras was blessed for this specific purpose. Though there was another Dragonborn who appears to have been blessed for similar ends, a former dragon priest turned Daedric prince pleaser by the name of Miraak. Before he took up residence in a tentacle-filled realm of endless libraries, Miraak, known as the First Dragonborn, lived among the Nords of Skyrim's late Merethic era. During the aforementioned Dragon Wars, Miraak was one of those lucky few ancients elevated to the upper echelons of civilization, gifted with the power, gear, and authority of the dragon priests. It was a time where the Nords had not yet heard of Akatosh or the Imperial Divines, and still worshipped their animal totem gods, with the dragon clearly having risen to prominence. To be a dragon priest was to rule like a king, just like kings of our world, who once acted as the voice between the divine and the masses. Dragon priests operated as the word between their winged god kings and the hordes of small soft creatures that worshipped them. They also embodied the word in a literal sense, taught how to use the thum by their masters. While some dragon priests were said to be just rulers, many others were harsh and oppressive, and as the dragon's iron-clawed tyranny further tightened its grip, the men of Skyrim rebelled. Miraak, who had taken his place over his fellow mortals as dragon priest, ultimately betrayed that duty. The text The Guardian and the Traitor presents what a man named Lucius Gallus was told after traveling to Skarl village and speaking to the shaman. According to the legend, one such dragon priest was seduced by a dark spirit named Hermamora. Lured by promises of power, this treacherous priest secretly plotted against his dragon master. The traitor's plot was discovered by one of his contemporaries, another dragon priest whom legend named the Guardian. The two fought a mighty battle that lasted for days, each hurling terrible arcane energies and thum shouts at the other. So great and terrible were the forces unleashed in this contest that Solstheim was torn apart from the mainland of Skyrim. The Guardian, who the legend presents as a paragon of loyalty and nobility, finally defeats the despicable traitor, who seems to represent all that is corrupt and evil in men. Unlike many similar myths, the tale of the Guardian and the traitor does not feature a suitably heroic ending. Hermamora snatches the traitor away, just as the Guardian is about to strike the killing blow. This Guardian, from the legend, was a dragon priest known as Valok the Jailer. How he got the upper hand on Miraak mystifies Elder Scrolls enthusiasts to this day, though it is wise to remember that being Dragonborn is not the only way of having immense power in Tamriel. Furthermore, legends do not always provide a perfect picture of exactly how events transpired. Freya, daughter of the Skarl's shaman, who later becomes shaman herself, actually tells the last Dragonborn that after Miraak turned against the dragons and made his own path, seeking to claim Solstheim for himself, that his actions cost him dearly, as the dragons destroyed him for it. Perhaps it was a team effort. The historian Tharstan backs up the stories when translating the inscription on the runes in Valok's tomb.
The writing describes a guardian who defeated someone named Miraak. In fact, if I'm reading this correctly, it says that Miraak was a traitor. Most interesting.
With remains of dragons hung about his temple like trophies, and stealing dragon souls from you where possible in a most haughty manner, there's no denying that Miraak relishes in his power, though there is an interesting page in the Elder Scrolls Online, thought to be written by Miraak under the name The First Servant, to an underling, claiming that long ago the Atmorans betrayed me, then they dared to name me traitor. With your help I will finally teach their descendants the error of their ways. However, based on his self-satisfied, power-hungry demeanor in Skyrim, I cannot help but think that revenge for his own supposed betrayal is not his driving motivator, and that this letter is either a falsehood or some sort of hysteric delusion he's convinced himself of after essentially being imprisoned in Apocrypha for many lifetimes, a place where people are known to lose their mind after far briefer stays. Regardless, he is remembered by the Skarl as a ruthless individual who followed a cruel path that the Dragonborn would be wise not to go down. In-game, he presents an attitude to match, constantly harping on about how his power trip back to Skyrim is all but imminent.
You have no power here, and it is only a matter of time before Solstheim is also mine. I already control the minds of its people. Soon they will finish building my temple, and I can return home.
He also has a tendency to reference fate, and that he is master of his own.
You are here in your full power, and thus subject to my full power. You will die, and with the power of your soul, I will return to Solstheim and be master of my own fate once again. Fate decreed that you had to die, so that I could win my freedom.
Such hubris does not bode well when one absconds their divine-given purpose. The name Mirac actually means allegiance guide in the dragon tongue, but their faith in him was clearly misplaced. This dragon priest was loyal solely to himself. Seemingly not satiated with the benefits of his newfound station, it would not have been hard for Hermaeus Mora to tempt him to turn on the dragons for even more power. With the Bend Will Shout, Mirac was gifted with the ability to not only slay his serpentine overlords and grow his power by absorbing their souls, an already impressive feat, but to command them. When Mirac realized he was Dragonborn is not explicitly stated, however it is a gift that he did not need Mora for. Perhaps Mora knew, given his dragon-like nature, that he would be easy to entice. He has similar aims with the last Dragonborn, and often asserts you are of a power-hungry nature.
I have watched your progress through my realm with growing interest. You are following in the footsteps of my servant Mirac. Like him, you are Dragonborn, and seek the power that is your birthright. I know what you want. To use your power as Dragonborn, to bend the world to your will.
Dragons themselves are known to be ambitious beings, insatiable beasts whose very nature is to dominate. One cannot help but assume, based on the history of the Elder Scrolls, that those imbued with the blood of a dragon carry similar inclinations. Even Paarthurnax suggests this.
We were made to dominate. The will to power is in our blood. You feel it in yourself, do you not? It is always wise to mistrust Adova. I have overcome my nature only through meditation and long study of the way of the voice. No day goes by where I am not tempted to return to my inborn nature. Zimgrifhorvut se suliech.
It appears that Mirac followed such urges as far as they could take him. The Greybeards warn the last Dragonborn of such a fate.
There is indeed much that we know that you do not. That does not mean that you are ready to understand it. Do not let your easy mastery of the voice tempt you into the arrogance of power. That has been the downfall of many Dragonborn before you.
Though do keep in mind that the Greybeards are a pacifist group, and therefore would not respect the brutality of figures such as Tiber Septim, for example, and likely consider his violence a downfall or failure of his potential, even if they were told his actions were the will of Akatosh. Still, pacifist or not, I'm sure they would agree that Mirac's ultimate defeat at the hands of the last Dragonborn is certainly worthy of being called a downfall, caused by being tempted into the arrogance of power. The timing of Mirac existing during the Dragon Wars and Alduin's betrayal of his duty is unlikely coincidence. With everything we know, I think it's fair to assume that Mirac was blessed by Akatosh to stop the World Eater, but simply betrayed his duty, living out his own power fantasy until he found himself trapped in Mora's realm. His dialogue does suggest this, if you've slain Alduin by the time you first meet him.
So you have slain Alduin. Well done. I could have slain him myself back when I walked the earth, but I chose a different path.
While the first part could simply be the bravado of any who see themselves become the champion of a Daedric prince, saying "I chose a different path" does indicate that Mirac is aware that it was he who was supposed to defeat the World Eater. He does have some less confident battle dialogue, perhaps at that stage viewing you more as an equal, where he says,
Felling Alduin was a mighty deed, and I thank you for it. He would have proved troublesome to me. They wanted to use me to deal with Alduin, Hakon and the rest.
but then still continues on to say that he chose otherwise. But as the prophecy goes, the wheel turns upon the last Dragonborn, not the first. It is the last Dragonborn who defeats Alduin, and despite Hermaeus Mora dealing the final blow, it is the last Dragonborn who bests the first. Miraak the traitor received his due punishment in the end, not only becoming trapped by Hermaeus Mora after turning his back on the dragon cult and seemingly his world eater slaying purpose, but finally being eliminated in a battle with the mythical figure we continually see bring Oathbringers and duty deniers to justice. With all the warnings given to the last Dragonborn not to give in to temptation, even by Freya, I would not be surprised if in The Elder Scrolls 6 you hear that the last Dragonborn was not heard of since venturing to Hermaeus Mora's realm. It would be a convenient way of removing such a god-tier weapon from any particular side of a politically tense landscape.
Do you ever wonder if it hurts to have one's soul ripped out like that? May he be rewarded for his service as I am.
Regardless, one must acknowledge that the timing of the Dragonborn is truly impeccable. The chance that the prophesized hero would appear in Skyrim in the exact same year as the return of Alduin and Miraak's planned return to Nirn is nothing short of divine intervention. But even more impressive is the last Dragonborn putting an end to 3 rather simultaneously encroaching perils. Skyrim's Dawnguard DLC introduces us to yet another dark temptation that the Dragonborn can succumb to: vampirism. Belonging to one of the many vampire bloodlines in the Elder Scrolls universe provides you with some rather superhuman abilities. While we don't have time to go into all bloodlines, the benefits often include things like improved stealth, strength, and proficiency in various dark magics and seduction, typically at the cost of insatiable bloodlust, a changed appearance, for the worse in my opinion, and an immortal arch-nemesis, the sun. For many, the trade is worth it, though whether or not you consent to acquiring such dark gifts is a different story. As a vampire, you may find it harder to blend into society if your face takes on particularly vampiric characteristics, not just pale skin and red or glowing eyes, but sometimes even bat-like features. Such is the case for many of Skyrim's Volkihar clan, their ranks including some of the most powerful vampires to ever walk Tamriel. They live comfortably within the trappings of lavish royalty, enjoying a steadfast profusion of thrall blood feasts. Those of Castle Volkihar consider the other vampires of Skyrim to be mere pests that must be exterminated as necessary, lest they grow too bold.
A cadre of lesser beasts has become a nuisance, taking too bold an approach to their feeding. The herd is becoming distressed, which makes it more difficult for us to slip in and out undetected. It is time to cull the weak. You have done well. It may seem cruel that we hold our thin-blooded kin in low esteem, but our needs must come before theirs.
But what gives them the right? Well, they would say this. Harkon is the patriarch of Castle Volkihar. He has led them for eras, successfully navigating the machinations of his fellow court members who try their best to covertly undermine his control in the hopes of one day usurping his throne. Harkon and his family are far more than ostentatious blood drinkers with the most gothic fits in all of Skyrim. They are pure-blooded vampires, able to turn into vampire lords and harness the many abilities that come with it. Pointed claws rend flesh from bone. Yearning fangs impale the throats of those foolish enough to fight so close. And when by Arkay's favor you find yourself with the upper hand, the beast flees, taking flight across a nearby lake, or vanishing into a swarm of bats. Their physical might is frightening, but it is these dark abilities, including their blood magic, that truly make vampire lords so powerful. Accepting such a powerful gift would be particularly tempting for a Dragonborn of ambitious make, and when Serana is returned to Harkon with the Elder Scroll upon her back, he offers to bestow this very power in return. Whether or not the last Dragonborn viewed it as a blessing or a curse, we can't know for sure. However, based on the theme of the last Dragonborn being a divine hero bringing betrayers to justice, I'd say rejection would be most fitting. Unlike the Dragonborn, who as far as we know, did not ask to be blessed by Akatosh, Harkon did covet vampirism for the immortality it would bring, and thus personally went to great lengths to attain it.
In an age long forgotten to history, I ruled as a mighty king. My domain was vast, my riches endless, and my power infinite. And yet, as my mortal life neared an end, I faced a seemingly invincible enemy, my own mortality. I pledged myself to Molag Bal, and in his name I sacrificed 1,000 innocents. In reward, he gave everlasting life to myself, my wife, and my daughter, and so I have defeated mortality itself.
There's no denying that Harkon betrayed thousands of his own people by having them sacrificed to the Daedric Prince of Domination, whose sphere encompasses the enslavement of mortals. He is said to be a cruel tyrant who oppressed his population ruthlessly in his quest for wealth and power, and clearly he has abandoned his duty as king to govern his people righteously and not merely for his own gain. Many would say that Harkon has also abandoned his duty to his family. Giving them everlasting life, as he said, meant they had to offer themselves to Molag Bal to receive his curse, who violated them like the first daughter of Coldharbour, LeMay Bal. Though Serana presents her turning as just another thing involved in her family's Daedra worship.
The ceremony was degrading. Let's not revisit that. But we all took part in it. Not really wholesome family activity, but I guess it's something you do when you give yourselves to a Daedric lord.
Her mother, Valerica, will tell you that as humans, they were already devout followers of Lord Molag, and such sacrifice was expected.
It was expected of her, just as it was expected of me. Being selected as an offering to Molag Bal is an honor. She wouldn't have dared turn her back on that. Tradition dictates the females be offered to Molag Bal on his summoning day. Few survive the ordeal. Those that do emerge as a pure-blooded vampire. We call such confluences the Daughters of Coldharbour.
Serana also says she's impressed if the last Dragonborn says that they already follow Molag Bal. She's a complex character and hardly a paragon of morality, though it would be fair to say she is a victim of her own upbringing. But it was Harkon's next obsession that truly tore his family apart. Even being a vampire lord was not enough. The sun's enfeebling effects frustrated him, and so he sought a solution for centuries until he stumbled upon a prophecy, the tyranny of the sun.
Now a voice whispers, saying, "Among the night's children, a dread lord will rise. In an age of strife, when dragons return to the realm of men, darkness will mingle with light, and the night and the day will be as one."
Scions of the night, hear my words. The prophesied time is at last upon us. Soon we will claim dominion over the sun itself, and forge a new realm of eternal darkness.
Ultimately, Harkon needs 3 Elder Scrolls, but he already had 2 of them by the time Valerica hid her daughter away in Dim Hollow Crypt with 1 scroll and herself in the Soul Cairn with another.
The second scroll declares that the blood of Coldharbour's daughter will blind the eye of the dragon.
Valerica had learnt that the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour, so hers or Serana's, was required to corrupt Auriel's bow, an artifact Harkon did not yet possess. Valerica isn't a save-the-world type, but simply thinks Harkon's plan is foolish, and would lead to every last vampire being hunted down and eliminated. Not to mention it would destroy the very life forms they exploit for their own gain. Auriel's bow must be corrupted to permanently cut off the sun's influence over Nirn. Just some of Serana's blood can be used on arrows to temporarily achieve this, and it appears a full-on sacrifice of Serana would be performed to fully cover the bow in blood and corrupt it entirely. Valerica believes the prophecy requires death, and even says that in Harkon's eyes, Serana would be dying for the good of all vampires. Harkon definitely wouldn't hesitate to turn on his own. Ultimately, the Dragonborn divine intervention recovers Auriel's bow and puts an end to Harkon, a great betrayer, whose unending search for power brought about his own demise and the foiling of the prophecy he wished to bring to fruition. However, while we can say Harkon and arguably Valerica failed in their duty as parents, and Harkon betrayed his people as king, the true betrayer of the Dawnguard DLC storyline is not found in Castle Volkihar, though possesses the same glowing eyes.
From what I saw in the vision, the Elder Scroll which foreshadows the defiance of the gods with the blood of mortals is the key to the prophecy.
Archcurate Vertha is a snow elf who set out to thwart divinity, and not just any divine, but Auriel himself, the elven analogue of Akatosh. He is the chief deity of most elven pantheons, and it is said that time itself began with his existence. While most would not consider Auriel specifically to be the one who blesses individuals with the dragon blood, he is most certainly connected to the Imperial Divines Akatosh, and therefore it is rather poetic that we see the last Dragonborn arrive in Skyrim to put an end to another betrayer who abandoned their duty to the Time God.
Auriel, Auriel, Alkosh, Akatosh, so many different names for the sovereign of the Snow Elves.
It was Vertha who conceived the very prophecy we've been discussing, to blot out the sun and plunge the world into darkness. He committed a sin that the Elder Scrolls V rarely shows forgiveness for. But why? In one word, revenge. At least that's what Vertha tells us. His title, Archcurate, refers to his position as the leader of the Chantry of Auriel. This grand temple was visited by snow elves seeking enlightenment and to become one with Auriel. They embarked upon a grueling pilgrimage through the Forgotten Vale, lugging around a heavy ewer between various way shrines, filling it at each before pouring it into the sacred basin of the inner sanctum. This would grant them access to an audience with the Archcurate himself, and according to the text touching the sky, it is said upon their arrival that many were mere shells of the person they had once been. Regardless of each individual's tale, the final words remain eerily similar. It is said that every pilgrim ascended, bathed in light, a look of relief and contentment on their face. Vertha was the one they'd be granted an audience with. He had the ears of a god, in his own embittered words. In our own world, a curate was a person invested with the care or cure of souls of a parish, essentially a priest. Vertha, as Archcurate, clearly a highly respected and important religious figure, was all the more resentful when he was turned into a vampire by one of his own initiates. Even Serana seems to agree with him.
Look into my eyes, Serana. You tell me what I am.
You're a vampire? But Auriel should have protected you.
The moment I was infected by one of my own initiates, Auriel turned his back on me. I swore I'd have my revenge, no matter what the cost.
You want to take revenge on a god?
Auriel himself may have been beyond my reach, but his influence on our world wasn't. All I needed was the blood of a vampire and his own weapon, Auriel's bow.
The blood of a vampire. Auriel's bow. It was you? You created that prophecy?
A prophecy that lacked a single final ingredient. The blood of a pure vampire. The blood of a daughter of Cold Harbor.
It is understandable that Vertha is enraged by his vampirism. Why he was unable to cure it before the disease truly took hold is hard to say, as shrines do appear to possess this disease-healing function in gameplay. Perhaps he was turned fast in the same way that Harkon can turn the Dragonborn, or didn't actually realize he had contracted the disease until it was too late. Maybe Vertha wronged Auriel, and the truth has been lost to time. After all, he has been waiting for errors. Do remember that the Aedra do not possess the same influence that Daedra do, which might explain Serana's confusion as a long-time Daedra worshipper. Let us not forget that the first daughter of Coldharbour, Lemay, was a priestess of Arkay, an Aedra who didn't appear able to save her from Molag Bal's corruption. She prayed to Arkay for help, but received no answer, and thus, just like Vertha, she cursed his name and swore to undermine him and Molag. Vertha, on the other hand, does say that the very moment he was infected, he was betrayed by Auriel, and then swore to have his revenge no matter what. It doesn't feel like he put true effort into seeking a cure at times. Perhaps Auriel was testing him. Regardless, the gods come first. And even if you think a god deserted you first, they seem to care little for the reasoning of mere mortals. Curse their name and abandon your faith in them, and things will not end well for you, like the other betrayers we've discussed. Interestingly, Vertha's brother Gelabor, who refuses to leave the way shrines unguarded, and thus violate his sacred duty as a knight paladin of Auriel, still lives after thousands of years, despite not being a vampire. Sure, elves and magic users can live a long time in the Elder Scrolls universe, but Gelabor is exceptionally old, over 4,000 years it seems, and I can't help but suspect Auriel has blessed him so he can protect the Veil and everything it represents as long as required. Once dead, perhaps through the grace of Auriel, he will be restored to a spectral form to continue his duty, like the prelates who wait by each way shrine.
Let twilight fall and blood spill!
In an ironic twist of fate, the very tool Vertha required, Serana, played a part in putting him down, alongside the lethal blows of the last Dragonborn. But by design, destiny, or free will of their own, it is not just Alduin, Miraak, Harkon, and Vertha that the last Dragonborn brings to justice. Every single main faction storyline sees the Dragonborn deliver the same message. Do not abandon your duty. Do not betray your oaths. Whether they be to Daedric princes or just to the traditions of old. In a world where morality is not always clean, a duty or oath is indifferent, and your word is all you have. Let us take a trip to a more material world. Situated on the eastern banks of Lake Honric, we have the hive of scum and villainy that is Riften. This once proud center of commerce in Skyrim now remains as a shadow of its former self. Earlier in the Fourth Era, after a few decades of Hosgun Crossdagger's rule, the denizens of Riften had simply endured enough of his unjust taxes, tyrannic curfews, and unremitting greed. They set his lavish residence ablaze, creating a giant conflagration that burnt much of the city to the ground. Many believe it all started with a betrayal, for the previous Jarl was in fact assassinated, and it is suspected that Hosgun was to blame. The city hasn't been the same since, and the notorious faction that lives within its sewer system known as the Ratway isn't doing too well either.
Welcome to Riften, home of the Thieves Guild. Or so they'd have you believe.
As much as this guard would know that the Thieves Guild does reside beneath his city, the guild's larceny has been anything but grand in recent times.
Look around you. The flagon, the guild, it's all falling apart. A few decades ago, this place was as busy as the Imperial City. Look, I know the others think I'm a bit daft for saying stuff like this, but I'm gonna give it you straight. Something out there is piss-drunk mad at us. I don't know who or what it is, but it's beyond just you and me. We've been cursed. I've got plenty of work available that could guide us down the road to recovery. All you need to do is ask, and we can both come out of this smelling like a rose.
You've got to admire his enthusiasm in the face of such decline. And he is right about the guild more or less being cursed, that something deeper has infected the prosperity of the guild. How else would they be seeing such an unusual rise in failed attempts to execute highly lucrative heists? However, while Delvin's heart is in the right place, the so-called curse cannot be lifted by doing endless amounts of side quests. Its dwindling influence will continue until very particular wrongs are made right. The current guildmaster, Mercer Frey, has made an enemy out of the Daedric Prince Nocturnal, the unfathomable mistress of shadows, the Empress of Murk. Nocturnal is considered a patron of thieves all across Skyrim, though after Mercer decided to steal her legendary artifact, the Skeleton Key, she has not been called Lady Luck for quite some time. In the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, Nocturnal tells you,
"To steal from a god is most unwise."
Though once you recover her submerged eye from Tidewater Cave, it appears that the two Argonian hunters who took it evade her wrath, at least for the time being. That said, I do believe Mercer's crime to be far more sacrilegious, even more so than the endeavors of Emma Derloth, the original Grey Fox. Derloth was a master thief in Cyrodiil in the Third Era, a few hundred years before those bold Argonians from Leowyn got a hold of the Eye. He too considered it a clever idea to rob the Saint of Suspicion and made off with her cow. There are some tales about how this occurred, but their reliability is questionable. Still, it happened, and I suspect Nocturnal allowed the ambitious thief to keep the cow. A note written by moth priests from the Office of the Unseeing Eye says that the cow going missing must be at the whim of Nocturnal, for she could reclaim it easily, and the Grey Fox himself in Oblivion says everything in that document is true. The cow makes the wearer far lighter and stealthier, even able to detect life force around them. One could also remove the cowl and no longer be seen as the infamous Grey Fox, but rather a stranger with no identity. But it was the destruction of one's identity that Nocturnal cursed the cowl with intentionally, a punishment that perhaps indicates that despite being impressed by Derloth, she is not one to be trifled with. One would truly be struck from their history books and the memories of anyone they ever knew, leaving their personal life in shambles, as seen with Corvus Umbranox, former Count of Anvil. The curse was ultimately broken with the help of a stolen Elder Scroll. While Corvus claims that Emma Derloth met his end not too long after the cowl was stolen, we can't know if Nocturnal was to blame. After all, this thief was clearly an enormous risk-taker. Regardless, we do know that the cowl was passed from leader to leader, without guild members lacking in luck. They did have enough to steal an Elder Scroll, and the organization still flourished for hundreds of years, albeit not as much as it could have if their guild leader was able to operate in the normal world of business and society, rather than merely as the guild's figurehead. Nevertheless, it was a far better fate than that which collectively befell Skyrim's Thieves Guild. Derloth was simply a thief who did what thieves do. Mercer, on the other hand, not only stole Nocturnal's skeleton key, but in doing so, broke an oath he swore to protect it. When you delve into the trap-filled pathways beneath Mercer's house in Riften, you enter a room filled with bits of treasure, Mercer's plans to steal the eyes of the Falmer from Erkingthand, and very interestingly, a tribute to the Grey Fox, a bust depicting him in the iconic mask. This suggests Mercer's Daedric Prince pilfering was inspired, at least in part, by Derloth. The moth priests who penned the previous note on the grey cow believed that to look upon Nocturnal's face without the cowl is to view the depths of the void. A man would lose his mind to see it. And yet Mercer Frey, a man who not only gazed upon the Night Mistress Nocturnal, but pledged his allegiance to her, even in death as part of the Nightingale Trinity, decided to desecrate her holy temple, the Twilight Sepulchre. The Nightingales, while not officially part of the Thieves Guild, have influence over how it operates. They act as nocturnal sentinels and avengers in life and in death, upon which they are bound to the sepulchre as guardian spirits, safeguarding her skeleton key until Nocturnal feels their contract has been fulfilled. After this, they become one with her realm, Evergloam, and hence part of the shadows that benefit all fellow thieves in their endeavors. Keeping the key safely in place ensures the Ebonmere stays open. This conduit between Mundus and the Evergloam is what allows her influence, the shadows, her so-called luck to seep into the mortal plane, benefiting thieves in their stealthy pursuits. This is what Mercer, in his greed, has decided to disrupt. he has not only betrayed a Daedric prince, but spoiled the success of other thieves in favor of his own. I suppose we cannot be surprised. While nightingales appear religious, they care most for themselves. They are thieves, and they do not just take an oath, but rather transact the oath, considering it as a business deal of sorts. Look, it's basically selling your soul to a demon for more riches. In return for their everlasting service, the Nightingales receive great powers that thieves all across Tamriel would envy. Some would sign their soul over for the armor alone, taking great pride in being covered head to toe in forged midnight. But Mercer was not satisfied by such gifts, and thus he stole Nocturnal's most powerful artifact. It may not look like much, but the unbreakable skeleton key can be used to open any lock. This is invaluable for any thief, and explains how Mercer had an unexplainable level of lockpicking talent at times, but most only use a fraction of its potential. In the right hands, it can also be used to unlock gates of a metaphysical nature, liminal crawl spaces, portals to Daedric realms, or even unlock one's untapped abilities, locked behind gates of limiting beliefs. There's a significant moment in Skyrim of the key being used in a unique way, though it's easy to overlook. When you're hunting Mercer through Erkingthand, a nearby tower collapses within the ruin.
The only reason he'd do that would be to block pursuit. It must be Mercer. We'll have to find another way around.
Mercer was able to knock this thing down. Gods.
It's the key, Brynjolf. In his hands, there's no telling what he's capable of.
Ultimately, Mercer is slain, his power fantasy and stealing spree at an end. Such is the fate of those who cannot uphold their end of the deal, whose word is as empty as the void. Truth be told, it was Carlia who sought such vengeance upon him, not just for desecrating the sepulchre and stealing from the guild, but for murdering her lover and former guildmaster, Gallus, and framing her for it. After 25 years of being on the run, you'd be mad enough to push friends into serving Nocturnal too. Whether necessary or not, she brought the last Dragonborn and Brynjolf as offerings to Nocturnal to gain the gifts she believed were needed to defeat Mercer, though it was the Dragonborn who struck the killing blow. It seems that Nocturnal allows mortals to suffer their own fate in a less direct way, rather than being the driving force behind it. At times, her apathy confuses those closest to her, but ultimately the clear message of betrayers meeting their demise holds true. Interestingly, Khajiit mythology holds that Nocturnal originally stole a key from Azura, presumably the skeleton key. As above, so below. But let us take a look at a faction where morals cannot even attempt to dabble in any shade of grey. In Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood, virtue is the colour of night. Sanguine, my brother. The Dark Brotherhood storyline runs with spilled blood from start to end as you get to enjoy some of Skyrim's most memorable quests. To join and progress through the faction, you must take part in many unquestionably immoral undertakings, from whacking hapless beggars to murdering a royal bride on her wedding day. This guild is so immoral that joining them is an option that only opens up to you after you've slain an elderly woman before a crowd of children, though some would say she had it coming. We're talking about a guild that worships the Night Mother, and yet the guild still abides by a moral code of sorts, or at least a set of rules, which we'll get into shortly. The origins of their unholy matron are shrouded in mystery, though it is likely that most in the Dark Brotherhood would believe the once a mere mortal mythology. The idea that the Night Mother was once a dark elf woman who lived in a small village once located where the city of Bravil stands now is supported by what we see in the Dark Brotherhood's Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion questline when she appears before you in spectral form in the crypt beneath Bravil's Lady of Luck statue. It was in Bravil where she was said to be slain, her house burned down by villagers who had rallied against her. But what iniquitous acts could she have committed to end up on the receiving end of such rage? Well, the story goes that Sithis himself visited this dark elf in her bedchamber. From this, she birthed 5 children, only to send their souls straight to the void, straight to their father 2 years later. Such an act from a mother is the ultimate betrayal, and thus her mortal form met a fitting end, considering the spirit of this video. But to the Dark Brotherhood, her actions were of great honor, for they served the Holy Dreadfather Sithis, bringer of ends. A little over 3 decades after the death of the Dunmer, an unnamed man heard a strange, comforting voice inside his very head, just as the Dunmer woman claimed to hear the voice of Sithis inside hers. The voice identified herself as the Night Mother, and named the man Listener, the first of many, and thus the Dark Brotherhood was born. Others believe that the Night Mother may in fact be Mephala, Daedric Prince of murder, lies, and deception. Betrayal is one of her core themes, and in Skyrim she grants the Dragonborn possession of the Ebony Blade, a weapon enriched by the blood of deceit, if used to murder those closest to the wielder. If you've watched our recent Dark Brotherhood lore dive, linked in the description, then you'd have very deep insight into the origins of the Night Mother. But right now, all you need to know is that whether the Night Mother is Mephala or the Dunmer who murdered her children for Sithis, both of them are more or less betrayal incarnate. This is rather interesting as we see yet again, like we did with the Thieves Guild, that betraying one's duty or breaking one's oaths is not colored by any sort of noble, high-minded morality. The message is not that betrayal is wicked or evil and therefore bad, but rather that the betrayal of oaths and duties, regardless of their moral quality, will bring about grave consequences. It seems that what matters is unwavering adherence to a particular way of doing things, or a duty you must fulfill, even if in this case that means staying true to the Dark Brotherhood's traditional ways of conducting conventionally evil acts. Gods, not including Alduin, may appear above such rules at first, but don't forget, entities like Nocturnal and Mephala can't help but engage the world in ways aligning with their domains. In fact, Nocturnal stealing the skeleton key from Azura in Khajiit mythology, or Mephala propagating the betrayal of others, is actually more of a reflection of these gods being true to themselves and adhering to their spheres. Alduin the World Eater, on the other hand, was rebelling against his own design, betraying his true purpose. With clear presence in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th eras, the Dark Brotherhood has existed for thousands of years, with varying degrees of success all across Tamriel. They are an organization that kills for coin and does so with a smile, for they not only enjoy their deathcraft, but believe it to be a holy, God-pleasing act. To arrange such a kill, you must first perform the Black Sacrament. After this candlelit, profane plea-whispering, flesh-effigy-stabbing ritual is concluded, you will eventually be visited by a Dark Brotherhood member, and so begins a contract bound in blood. Such religiosity has been interwoven with the actions of the guild for over a millennium. However, by the time Skyrim takes place, the Dark Brotherhood has experienced a great decline. Such deterioration is not only apparent in their dwindling presence and destruction of their sanctuaries, touched on in Cicero's journals, but in their faltering adherence to the principles that have guided them for eras. The Dark Brotherhood still serves Sithis by sending souls to the Void, but outside of this, their reverence for him is shown mostly in name, in phrases like, by Sithis. In reality, the guild has left his most dear bride, the Night Mother, abandoned at the altar. Astrid, the current leader, has scoffed at the old ways and abandoned her duty of ensuring the guild adheres to the 5 tenets. These are sanctified rules that must not be broken, laws that unite the Brotherhood, not only with each other, but in unholy matrimony with Sithis and the Night Mother. Even a faction that worships a betrayer and is clearly immoral will not suffer treachery amongst their own. Their own moral framework must be respected.
I once saw Lucian deal with an insubordinate brother, someone who had broken the tenets. It took me a week to get the blood off my boots.
Breaking any of the 5 tenets will invoke the wrath of Sithis, who manifested as a ghastly wraith one had to defeat in Oblivion if they wished to rejoin the guild. Astrid may not betray every single tenet by the end of Skyrim's Dark Brotherhood plot, but she certainly breaks a few and rejects the idea of them as a guiding force altogether. The tenets are as follows. 1. Never dishonor the Night Mother. 2. Never betray the Dark Brotherhood or its secrets. 3. Never disobey or refuse to carry out an order from a Dark Brotherhood superior. 4. Never steal the possessions of a Dark Brother or Dark Sister. 5. Never kill a Dark Brother or Dark Sister.
Used to be the Dark Brotherhood was bound by 5 tenets, but we stopped following those years ago. All those rules, all that discipline, and look where the Dark Brotherhood ended up. We're the last of our kind, and we live the way we see fit. Bottom line, respect your family. Do that, and everything else will fall into place.
The Falkreath Sanctuary has been Astrid's entire life since she was a young woman. She met her husband here, rose to leadership, and I do believe that in her heart, Astrid truly sees the Falkreath Brotherhood members as her family. She would not wish to kill them until she feels her position is threatened. She calls their Falkreath Sanctuary the safest place in all of Skyrim when you first join, a statement that rings with a rather eerie echo once you've seen the place crawling with Penitus Oculatus as it's being burned to the ground. We can trace this chaos back to the arrival of Cicero, and more importantly, the arrival of the Night Mother, who he had so dutifully taken care of and carted to Skyrim. Cicero, the Keeper of the Night Mother, is the most devoutly religious Dark Brotherhood member by the time Skyrim takes place, and of course, the craziest.
You of course know that the Night Mother is our unholy matron. The undying spirit of a great woman who birthed the children of Sithis and killed them in his honor.
Cicero honors the most traditional aspects of the faction, putting him at odds with Astrid, whose disrespect of the Night Mother is constant, viewing Cicero as nothing more than an impediment to conducting business as usual. Some other members share this disrespect, while others, namely Festus, would welcome a return to tradition. Astrid tells Cicero that while he and the Night Mother are welcome and that his position as keeper is respected, she's still the boss, and her word is law. Soon enough, she grows paranoid, feeling threatened by a return to the old ways.
Who is he speaking with? What are they planning? I fear treachery. As the Night Mother's keeper, he believes he's entitled to rule of this sanctuary. Cicero will cite our independence as the need to revert to the old ways. He'll claim we're undisciplined, unruly, heretical even. Ironically, the Night Mother could prove to be just as much a victim. The queen in a fool's twisted game of chess.
She asks you to sneak inside the Night Mother's very coffin to spy on Cicero, regardless of you voicing how disrespectful that is. Tenet number 1 has been broken many times already. In fact, if you previously asked her if anything will change now that the Night Mother is here, she commits nothing less than blasphemy.
Very little. You have my word on that. The Night Mother represents a chapter in the Dark Brotherhood's history that has long since been closed. Today we live by our own rules. We're the last sanctuary in all of Tamriel, and only by foregoing the old ways have we survived for so long.
After you hide in the coffin, Astrid barges in to learn that the Night Mother has spoken to the last Dragonborn, and hence he is listener of the Dark Brotherhood. She should recognize and respect this immediately, yet doesn't, confirming her fears that the Night Mother indeed spoke to you and told you to speak with Armand Mortier in Vollenrud, only fans the flames of insecurity building within.
No. Listen, I don't know what's going on here, but you take your orders from me. Are we clear on that? The Night Mother may have spoken to you, but I am still the leader of this family. I will not have my authority so easily dismissed. I need time to think about all this.
After composing herself temporarily, she acknowledges that it would be mad to ignore it if the Night Mother really did give you an order to talk to a contact. Ultimately, learning of a plot to assassinate the Emperor and seeing the Elder Council amulet does get her excited, though she still continues to voice doubts over whether you are actually the Night Mother's choice of listener. Following the assassination of Vittoria Vici, Astrid rewards the last Dragonborn with the ability to summon a spectral assassin, none other than Lucien Lachance, Dark Brotherhood OG and speaker in The Elder Scrolls IV. He can offer a more traditional point of view. For example, after you assassinate Commander Maro's son, you return to the Sanctuary to find that Cicero has unleashed his fury on the other members before escaping. Tracking him to the Dawnstar Sanctuary gives you the option to kill him. Astrid and Arnbjorn would love it, but the spectral assassin says this:
I will kill this jester if you so desire, but there is a disturbance in the void. Our dread father does not wish this. The Keeper is a sacred position within the Dark Brotherhood. Ask yourself, do you trust the wisdom of Our Lady?
Sparing Cicero makes the most sense for a Dark Brotherhood traditionalist. After all, who could blame him? Imagine being part of the Brotherhood, loving your role as an assassin, only to be made Keeper in a time of great need. You put down the blade to instead sanctify the remains of a corpse regularly. You wash the corpse weekly with the requisite oils, recite the ancient incantations, and personally see to the extermination of any insects or rodents. You then travel with this coffin, keeping it safe and bringing it all the way to Skyrim, only for the Night Mother, the head of your faction, to remain disrespected, your desire to restore the old ways unfulfilled. Even when a listener is finally named, you are met with rejection and ridicule. After Cicero's attack, Astrid even admits that Cicero may have overheard her disrespecting the Night Mother. After you dispose of and take the place of the chef, the gourmet, in a failed assassination attempt on the Emperor, Astrid meets her well-earned demise. As you stand above her charred body, it is revealed that her betrayal has escalated far beyond religious disrespect.
I hope I said this. I was such a fool. All of this, it's all my fault. I set you up. I wanted you dead. I betrayed you, the Night Mother, and everything I hold dear. And now, Marrow has betrayed me. I just wanted things to stay the way they were. The Night Mother was right. The old ways, they guided the Dark Brotherhood for centuries. I was a fool to oppose them, and to prove my sincerity, I have prayed for a contract. You lead this family now. I give you the Blade of Woe, so that you can see it through. You must kill me.
The listener goes on to assassinate the Emperor aboard the Kataraya, restore the guild to prominence, and lead the faction with the Night Mother at its helm as she should be. Astrid not only disrespected the Night Mother, but tried to have you, the listener, killed. Many Dark Brotherhood members perished as a result, and Astrid met the same fate of those in Skyrim who betray their duty to the gods and abandon their oaths, or in this case, their tenets.
Astrid is dead. It is as it should be. May she find redemption in the void.
While forgoing your duty to uphold the true ways ultimately comes back to bite you, it does appear that redemption remains possible if sought. Descending onto the plains of Whiterun from everyone's favorite way there, you will encounter a belligerent giant being fought off by the mighty companions. Whether or not you get there in time to avoid being scolded by Ayla for not helping is another story.
Ha! Another milk drinker crying about his effort. Glory only awaits those who triumph. And as companions, our glory must always be hard fought.
Perhaps you do get there in time in your playthroughs, but regardless, heading into the city and joining this guild of glory hunting mercenaries is what they recommend. Vignar, an old Nord and former companion who lives in Jorvaska, would advise otherwise.
No, they used to be something. Nowadays, they just squabble amongst themselves. Take my advice and keep away. You look too smart to get caught up with this bunch.
The companions take on public and private jobs for those who have the coin, and while they declare to be upholding the honor of Ysgramor, this claim can get murky at times. One Radiant mission can send you to beat up a target to teach them a lesson, with Farkas saying he doesn't even know what it's about, but that it's not the companions' business anyway. The guild proclaims their historic neutrality to politics, which is true, but some of their day-to-day activities can feel like Thieves Guild thug jobs, and not exactly honorable. Regardless, the guild does indeed have its historical roots in Ysgramor and the 500 companions, whose names are recited in celebration in Windhelm during the yearly Feast of the Dead. Ysgramor was an Atmoran best known for bringing his companions back to Skyrim to seek vengeance on the elves who had betrayed them at Sarthal back in the Merethic era. At least that's how the Nord side of the story goes when it comes to the infamous Night of Tears. Ysgramor and his kin took part in a large-scale slaughter of elves all over Skyrim, which would be continued by Nordic kings for centuries to come. The snow elves that weren't cut down by shouting barbarians survived underground, making a pact with the Dwemer for their safety. The Dwemer would go on to enslave the snow elves, feeding them a toxic fungus that blinded them and eventually led them to become the corruptions we see in the Fourth Era. Another name for these Falmer is quite literally the Betrayed, though perhaps it's their punishment for the Night of Tears. But that and the eventual disappearance of the Dwemer is a tale for another day, so make sure you're subscribed to be overwhelmed with more Elder Scrolls lore. The Companion's iconic mead hall is made from the hull of Jorvaska, one of their many ships. It is a place of great significance and a reminder of the values Ysgramor cared for, the honor and glory of battle, the ways of a true Nord. The crew of the Jorvaska was formed of Ysgramor's closest friends, and captained by Jeek of the River, who was named as such by Ysgramor himself from their youths past in glory. Jeek is credited to have been the keeper of the now-forgotten Oath of the Companions, which perfectly encapsulates the fate of the guild, one with an ever hazier idea of who they are supposed to be, at least in action. After proving yourself strong enough to be a whelp within this highly esteemed guild, you can choose to talk to your fellow guild members about the Companions and what they think it means to be one.
The oldest fighting group in Skyrim, and nothing but glory from Ysgramor's day to our own. To be counted in that line is a bit of immortality. Even if I never see Sovngarde, I'll have that much.
You'll hear some of the brighter faces around here talk about honor and glory. I've got nothing against it. But for me, the promise of coin is what feeds my blade. Wherever someone in Skyrim doesn't feel up to defending their own honor, we'll take up their burden.
Ask any fool around here and get a different answer. Mercenaries, warriors of honor, brothers and sisters of the blade, drunken rabble. Take your pick. I've been here longer than most of them. Even I don't know sometimes.
It means signing on for the Nord ideas of how to live your life. Honor, battle, glory, all that. Even an elf can be born with the heart of a Nord. Skjor said when I joined. I think he meant it as a compliment.
It is disappointing that the newer, less admired members are the ones giving an answer closer to how the Companions should see themselves. While the guild has its root in a figure known for his slaughter of elves, he is, in essence, venerated by the Companions for the glory he earned in battle and his role in leading the Companions to Skyrim, rather than for hatred or vengeance. In fact, the Companions ultimately ended up accepting non-Nords into their ranks all the way back in the First Era, even having an elf as Harbinger lead them near the closing of the First Era. Do keep in mind that Harbingers do not technically rule in a commanding sense, and instead function more so as greatly respected advisors, resolving disputes, offering guidance, and clarifying questions on the nature of honor as they steer the path of the guild in the right direction, or such is the intent. Both exceptional and terrible harbingers have been at the helm of the companions. However, the most damaging of all harbingers has a secret that many guild members today do not know of. He accepted Hircine's gift, or curse, of lycanthropy. Turfig, of the late 2nd or early 3rd era, is named in Kodlak Whitemane's journal as the man who turned the guild towards the Daedric Lord of the Hunt. It reads, "In my dream, I see the line of harbingers start with Ysgramor. Each of them ascends to Sovngarde until we come to Turfig, who first turned us to the ways of the beast. He tries to enter Sovngarde, but before we can even approach Sun, he is set upon by a great wolf, who pulls him into the hunting grounds, where Hircine laughs with welcoming arms. Turfig seems regretful, but also eager to join Hircine after a lifetime of service as a beast. Then I see every next harbinger turn away from Sovngarde and enter the hunting grounds of their own accord, until it comes to me, and I see Great Sun on the misty horizon, beckoning me. It appears I have a choice, and then at my side, a stranger I had not seen before. This stranger is the last Dragonborn, and Kodlak wishes for them to help him cure himself of his lycanthropy, so he can embrace the fellowship of Sovngarde in the afterlife.
Well, I grow old. My mind turns towards the horizon, to Sovngarde. I worry that Shor won't call an animal to glory as he would a true Nord warrior.
Not only is Kodlak a werewolf, but so are all other members of the Circle, a subgroup of the guild held in higher respect than other members. Being in the Circle provides a kind of pseudo-leadership over the other companions, and all within the Circle are supposed to serve as shining examples to the younger, newer members of what a companion should be. The Circle itself was named after Ysgramor's Council of Captains and was brought about back in the 2nd era by Kirinil Longnose. After a string of false and dishonorable harbingers laid claim to Jorvaska, he gathered the true hearts of the companions in the wilds and stormed the mead hall, killing the usurpers and returning honor through blood in the old ways. Perhaps Ysgramor would think such action is appropriate for the current Circle given their lycanthropy. In fact, back in the 2nd era, during the events of the Elder Scrolls Online, we get a direct insight into the mindset of the companions before they were turned into Hircine's beasts through a deal made with Glenmoral witches. The companions in the online game have a sage named Svari, who was tasked with recording the deeds and glories of the companions. She called upon Ysgramor's wisdom to guide those new to the guild, and did her best to fill gaps of knowledge present in the tomes they possessed at the time. One of her texts, an accounting of werewolves, reads, "I've spoken to Nords from Windhelm to Iverstead, and everyone agrees that cults of Hircine, and thus werewolves who are his children, are on the rise across Skyrim. I've even heard reports that some madmen have been actively seeking out the curse of lycanthropy." Straight away, we see that this devout member of the companions thinks becoming a werewolf falls within the realm of insanity. She continues, "I do not think I should need to remind anyone, especially any Nord, of the evil of the Daedric princes, even of one who claims the joy of hunting as his realm. There may be some draw to the wild power of werewolves, but you'd better remember that you'll never see the halls of Sovngarde when Hircine claims your soul. Lycanthropes spend eternity in Hircine's hunting grounds, slaves to his unending thirst for blood and the chase, instead of drinking mead and brawling with the heroes of legend." She goes on to recount the knowledge of companions members who encountered these were-creatures, who describe these werewolves as grotesque, as monsters, and who say that you should avoid getting their disease in your blood through a bite or cut, and if you do, to get to a priest as soon as possible. It all stands in stark contrast to the 4th era Circle. Older companions, holding truer to Ysgramor's teachings, would detest lycanthropy. I'd bet that Jeek's now forgotten oath of the companions would not be compatible with throwing away an honorable journey to Sovngarde in exchange for prowling the hunting grounds of a Daedric prince eternally. Yet when Skyrim takes place, this is exactly what we find. The Harbinger Kodlak wants to cure his lycanthropy, and two members of the Circle, Farkas and Vilkas, while able to appreciate the power of their werewolf form, agree with Kodlak and also prefer to be cured when the opportunity arises. Ayla and Skjor, on the other hand, are as fond of the curse as they are of each other, and relish in their beast blood.
Be cautious. Beasts are not nearly as predictable as men. Give the thing a quick death.
Here, Ayla is actually referring to a beast you must slay for the companion's Radiant Animal Extermination quest, but ironically, it holds true for werewolves in general. The beast form and the bloodlust it brings can be hard to resist. The chance that you may transform at a non-desirable time and kill innocents is a possibility you cannot ignore. It would not be hard to argue that living among society with such a curse isn't exactly the most honorable thing to do. In the companion storyline, you're told that you must accept this curse to become a member of the Circle, and upon doing so, you're forced to flee the city as a werewolf while being attacked by everyone in it. A rather irresponsible act for a group supposedly priding themselves on honor. Eventually, you black out, only to awake to Ayla, who shows zero care for Whiterun, even if you killed people in the city. She just says that your transformation was tough, but you're alive and they've got a celebration planned for you. A mass slaughter of a large group of Silverhand members.
We're going to slaughter them. All of them. I almost envy you. That first time is always the most intense. You gave us even more trouble than Farkas did at his first turning. Just be careful where you do it. Some cowards in this land can't stand the sight of glory before them.
Ayla sounds a bit psychopathic, to be honest. Don't be mesmerized by her scantily clad form. She will tell you this is no curse, and that if Kodlak's worried about some mead-swilling afterlife in Sovngarde, he's free to pursue it, but she'll take the glories of the hunt instead. She refers to the Silver Hand as easy prey, and clearly shows no remorse for her violence, or for clearly no longer embodying the old ways of Ysgramor and his companions.
You wanted to see me?
I worry that you've been spending too many nights out.
Where I go is my business. If you have a concern about my honor, bring it before the Circle.
We do this in secret because Kodlak is too busy trying to throw away this great gift we've been granted. How can something that gives this kind of prowess be a curse? So we take matters into our own hands.
Skjor, who views the curse favorably also, is ultimately slain by the Silver Hand, a fitting end for a companion who has lost sight of the old ways, what Kodlak calls the true path of Ysgramor. This is what he hopes to guide the guild back to. However, as Harbinger, he does not have full control, and the guidance he tries hard to instill in Ayla and Skjor falls upon deaf ears. Alongside Ayla, you slaughter many Silverhand, and continue to kill more in vengeance through Radiant quests.
Your hearts are full of grief, and my own weeps at the loss of Skjor. But his death was avenged long ago. You have taken more lives than honor demanded. The cycle of retaliation may continue for some time.
Kodlak's clear lack of hatred towards the Silver Hand is interesting. It's a good reminder for a lot of players that the Silver Hand aren't really evil or the bad guys per se. Sure, some may torture werewolves, but that's not that intense within the setting of Tamriel. If that's evil, then the Empire is evil, the Dawnguard are evil, and so on. You get the idea. Maybe some werewolves aren't violent, not all vampires are, but no one thinks the Dawnguard are evil for hunting them. No one thinks the Vigilants of Stendarr are evil, even though they'd happily slay werewolves, along with Daedra and undead. Every werebeast you find in the wild is hostile. They're dangerous beings given their form and bestial desires by a Daedric prince. There's a theory, a decently strong one in my opinion, that the Silver Hand originate from a splinter group of the companions who did not like the dishonorable direction the faction took. Kodlak describes Turfig as a good but short-sighted man who was actually deceived by the witches of Glenmoral Coven, stating more or less that he didn't know the werewolf form would be a permanent change. However, after Turfig, when other harbingers truly indulged the beast form willingly, perhaps others left and formed their own mercenary group, devoted to truly honoring Ysgramor and exterminating these heretical werewolf types. We don't have time to go super deep into the theory, so I recommend you check out this video here. However, it seems the Silver Hand have a particularly strong interest in Ysgramor. After you return from collecting the heads of the witches who originally deceived Turfig to assist Kodlak in curing his werewolf form, the Silver Hand have attacked Jorrvaskr. They have slain Kodlak, but they also, while dealing with some of the best fighters in all of Skyrim, risked their lives, with many dying, to successfully take the guild's Wuthrad fragments. Surely they would have been more effective if they just got in, killed Kodlak and whoever else they could, and got out. On top of this, when you loot the bodies of Silverhand members, they can have a book in their possession. There's a 1 in 4 chance it's a lycanthropy book, but a massive 3 out of 4 chance that the book they possess is one of the Songs of the Return, a series exploring Isgramor's deeds and the great events which took place involving the companions. You may think that Isgramor is important to all Nords, a popular character with widespread books, but the Silver Hand is comprised of other races, including Orcs, Dunmer, Khajiit, and so on, all found with these books of Isgramor. Why would they be so interested without some sort of shared cultural connection? Regardless of their origins, you and Vilkas ultimately get the fragments back, Eorland reforges Wuthrad, and you use it to gain access to Isgramor's tomb. Here you free Kodlak's soul by throwing one of the witch heads into the flame of the Harbinger and defeating Kodlak's wolf spirit. Kodlak is thankful to be freed, though says other Harbingers remain trapped by Hircine.
Perhaps from Sovngarde, the heroes of old can join me in their rescue. The harrowing of the hunting grounds. It would be a battle of such triumph. And perhaps someday you'll join us in that battle.
But if this happens before Alduin is slain, Kodlak is trapped by his mist in Sovngarde.
When I woke from cold death, my doom was lifted. There was Shore's Hall, my heart's desire. But now I wander, weary and lost. Alduin hunts me, as we once hunted our prey. A bitter payment for many bloody deeds.
That last part makes it sound as if Kodlak faces this additional punishment for being a Harbinger who accepted the curse, betraying the true ways of Isgramor, though he finds salvation in the very end.
Do not fail Kodlak. He's earned his place here, and does not deserve to fall prey to Alduin's insatiable hunger.
Once the World Eater is defeated, Kodlak takes his place in the Hall of Valor. Farkas and Vilkas are cured and thus redeemed if you go to the effort, so they get their happy ending.
I can breathe more deeply now. I can't smell your heart beating the way I used to, but my mind is clear. This is a great service you've done for me, Harbinger. I will not soon forget. Now, I'd like to spend some time communing with Isgramor. My soul is clean now. Perhaps he'll still welcome me when my time comes.
Ayla somehow gets out of it all unscathed for the time being, a rarity for those who turn their backs on the old ways. Perhaps now, as a more zealous follower of Hircine, she is favored by him, and it is he who she should not betray. She will try to seek out Hircine's totems, one of Skjor's wishes. Overall, the Companion's plot shows us that redemption is possible. A return to the old ways, if sought, appears to be for the best. Kodlak and Skjor may have fallen, direct consequences of the guild betraying Isgramor's ways, and possibly breaking that forgotten oath, but the guild is set on a better path if the new Harbinger cures their form. Skyrim's College of Winterhold features multiple betrayers, though the theme tends to exist in a simpler form, without strong or explicit ties back to the abandonment of divine duty or breaking oaths to gods or the old ways. Nevertheless, I'd love to explore it a little before we dive into everyone's favorite topic, the ultra-controversial Skyrim Civil War. Skyrim's College of Winterhold is not the institution it used to be, although it's fared much better than the rest of Winterhold, and better than some of the other guilds. Much of Winterhold's city fell into the ocean during an event known as the Great Collapse, though the college ended up comparatively unscathed. Archmage Savos Aren is the current leader of the college by the time Skyrim takes place, and will mention how some believe Red Mountain is to blame for the collapse, and how the Sea of Ghosts practically came alive, and no one expected the monstrous waves that battered the shore for weeks on end. As we'll discover though, he isn't exactly the most trustworthy character. Upon proving your magical capabilities to Feralda at the guild's entrance, she will let you venture up and across the dilapidated bridge and into the college. college. Immediately you come to meet Mirabelle, who was having a heated argument with resident Thalmor advisor Encano. He is met with distrust from some of the mages within the institution, and of course he is a member of the Thalmor, the pro-elven supremacy organization who act on behalf of the Oldmiri Dominion. You know, the bad guys in Skyrim, the enemies of the Empire in the Great War which has ravaged the land and led to the Civil War, the antagonists for the main story outside of Alduin. You get the idea. It is of no surprise that Encano, who even the Sijic monks show distrust to, ends up the betrayer of the College of Winterhold storyline. His lies can be easy to catch.
The what? No, I'm quite sure I have no idea what you're talking about. I suggest you mind your own business and return to whatever it is you do here.
Look, it's not Skyrim's strongest faction story, as discussed in this video from a long time ago, so we won't dive through it from start to end. However, the short version is this. You cast a spell to get in, block a spell in a lecture with Tolfdir, and immediately get sent into the dangerous Dragofield ruin of Sarthal, where you pick up an amulet and meet an apparition from the Sijic Order. You're told you've set in motion a chain of events that cannot be stopped. You go on to discover the Eye of Magnus, which, as discussed earlier, is an artifact that seems to have a history of betrayal tied to it, as the Snow Elves' knowledge of it existing under the Nordic settlement of Sarthal is said to have led to the Night of Tears, the slaughter of the men there, who then, led by Ysgramor, returned to exterminate the elves. So you find the Eye, retrieve books about it, consult college scholars and the Augur of Dunlane to learn that you need the Staff of Magnus to avert the disaster the Sijics warned about. You venture into a Dwemer ruin where a Synod mage tells you that the Staff of Magnus is in Labyrinthian. Returning to the college with your news, you find that Encano, the highly suspicious Thalmor mage, has betrayed the college. His sworn duty as merely an advisor has proven false. Some would say he also betrayed his fellow Thalmor, coveting the Eye of Magnus's power for himself instead of staying undercover as a spy, or somehow bringing the artifact to them first, unless he had orders to instantly try and unmake the world with it, which would align with some conspiracies and theories regarding the Thalmor's ultimate plan, though such urgency would appear rash on their part.
You've come for me, have you? You think I don't know what you're up to? You think I can't destroy you? The power to unmake the world at my fingertips. And you think you can do anything about it?
While he says unmake the world directly, his enjoyment of the power it brings is palpable, and one gets the impression he doesn't desire to just wipe everything, including himself, into a state of non-existence. Mirabelle and Savos do their best to confront him, but you all end up smashed by a giant light that erupts from the Eye. Mirabelle is wounded, and Savos Aren, blasted to the courtyard, has been slain. After destroying some magical anomalies caused by the blast that kills Savos, you venture into Labyrinthian, defeat the dragon priest Morokai, get the Staff of Magnus, kill Encano's buddy Astormo, and return to the college. Mirabelle has died, but you use the staff to break the barrier, and then on the Eye of Magnus to break Encano's connection to it in a massive battle that hopefully has you slay the betrayer, ensuring his deceit-sealed demise.
No! The Eye is mine! Die, insect! My power is supreme.
Ultimately, you are named Archmage for saving the day, but it's the previous Archmage we'll be turning our attention to now. Like Encano, he is shown to be a traitor, albeit a less dangerous end-of-the-world type, and consequently received the comeuppance he was due. Mages aren't known to be the most moral individuals, and Savos is no exception, despite the shame he feels for his actions. Long ago, before Savos had climbed to the station of Archmage, he and 5 other students decided to venture into the ancient depths of Labyrinthian. When you go there to retrieve the Staff of Magnus, apparitions of the students still remain, and play out the events of their failed attempt at arcane glory.
Come on, we're finally here. Let's not waste any more time. Enchanted weapons, tomes of ancient knowledge, Shalador's secrets themselves. Who knows what we could find?
The group is killed off slowly the further they press on.
We have to go back. We can't leave Gerduin.
We barely made it out alive, and you want to go back in?
It's too late. There isn't enough of him left to go back in after.
We can't go back. Might as well go forward. We can still do this.
The death continues, and before the final chamber, the group makes a pact to stay together no matter what.
We shouldn't have left her there to die.
What else could we do? Stay there and die with her? She refused to go on. We didn't have a choice.
This is it, you know. Through this door. Can you feel it?
We're not going to make it, are we?
We stay together, no matter what. Agreed?
I'll be right with you.
Agreed. We all stay together.
Ultimately, Savos Aren betrays the two remaining students, breaking his promise to them and trapping them to seal away Morokai.
I'm sorry, friends. I'm so sorry. I had no choice. It was the only way to make sure that monster never escaped. I promise you, I'll never let this happen again. I'll seal this whole place away.
Savos' apparition shows remorse, but he still chooses to hide his secret for years. We don't actually know exactly how the Staff of Magnus got into Labyrinthian and into the hands of Morokai. Savos Aren doesn't give up anything about it, though maybe he's hiding the truth. Regardless, it is rather poetic that this powerful staff, which made its way into the hands of Morokai, where Savos' betrayal unfolded, ended up being required in order to save the day from the same events that led to Savos Aren's death, and in a way that exposed his shameful and traitorous secret to the next Archmage. It's hard to forgive such an act when he maintains such an uncaring attitude towards his students.
Please don't tell me that another one of the apprentices has been incinerated. I have enough to deal with right now.
So we have both Savos and Encano as betrayers in their own right. The guild is likely on a better path, without a leader who has been shown to put his needs above others despite promising not to, and additionally couldn't spot their Thalmor advisor was not to be trusted and would ultimately betray the college. Skyrim is a game packed with peril and doom. The World Eater is upon us, Mirak plans to return to Mundus, and vampires who wish to blot out the sun run rampant, attacking innocent cities and settlements. Once prominent guilds battle against treachery from within, while others face new threats emerging from the consequences of actions past. Turmoil abounds with no end in sight. And in the background of it all is everyone's favorite topic, the Civil War. Skyrim has been plunged into chaos, with none other than the Stormcloak Rebellion taking the fight against a crumbling empire. The Thalmor are thriving, hoping that neither side wins in totality, for the Civil War weakens two of their enemies with little sacrifice of their own as they prepare for the next inevitable Great War. The resulting strife and disorder emerging from the Civil War is fueled by many betrayals, both metaphysical and personal. I will say that whether or not the last Dragonborn would side with the Empire or the Stormcloaks is not for the scope of this video. The Dragonborn is a demigod-like hero who saves the world many times over and who, with their mighty thumb, is so powerful they could easily decide who wins the conflict. Though if you're looking for an exploration of all the moral perspectives of each faction, I do highly recommend you check out our deep dive video linked in the description we released not long ago. The ultimate betrayal at the heart of the Civil War and its root cause is that of an empire who turned its back on Talos by signing the White Gold Concordat with the Thalmor, agreeing to ban Talos worship in their lands. This goes against everything the Empire stands for, and especially enraged the proud Nords of Skyrim, who had spilled blood for this very empire, and to whom Talos worship is of great importance. Through the many storylines of Skyrim we've explored so far, you will have noticed that the reason for the betrayal is not as important as the act itself. Consequences will follow regardless. Therefore, I am not here to make an argument of practicality, to argue whether or not the Empire did in fact need to bend the knee to the elves to save themselves or bide time for a future war. The Red Guards of Hammerfell, who ultimately seceded from the Empire, successfully repelled the Thalmor and struck a much better agreement, certainly think the Empire folded too fast. Regardless of the truth and the circumstances, one cannot merely throw away their morals and dutiful convictions in times of convenience, or at least that's how the Stormcloaks see things, and the gods tend to agree, at least in the other plots we've gone through. Let us establish the importance of Talos to the Imperials and the Nords, not just for their individual cultures, but as a binding force of unity. Back in the Merethic era, the Nords worshipped their animal gods. Eventually, these animal deities transformed into the gods of the Old Nordic pantheon: Kain, Mara, Debella, Stun, and Junal, as well as the dead gods, Sun and Shor, known as Lorcan by the elves. Alduin and Orki also existed as gods, but ones to be feared. The Nords were a powerful, militant culture, possessing many thumb-wielding barbarians who prided themselves on honor and glory in battle. In early First Era conquests, they slaughtered their ancient elven enemies across multiple provinces, including places where other populations of men had been subjugated to elven rule. Ultimately, these Nords would come to the rescue of the Nedic inhabitants of Cyrodiil during Alesia the Slave Queen's rebellion, helping to defeat their slave masters and make way for a new era of men. These Needs, who would go on to become the Imperials, were used to worshipping the elven gods of their previous overlords. However, Alesia sought to create a unified religion, one that both Nords and Needs would view amicably and respect. Thus, the Eight Divines religion was formed. These divines would feel somewhat similar to both races of men. You had Julianos instead of Junal, Kinnereth instead of Kain, Stendar instead of Stun, and so on. No Daedra, of course. Akatosh, not Auriel, was the chief deity, different enough in theme to the world-eating dragon the Nords feared. The Eight Divines became the primary religion for these Proto-Imperials. It was more palatable to the Nords, and was eventually adopted by those who stayed, becoming the Ciro-Nords and ultimately the Clovians, though those back in Skyrim still held to their traditional gods for most of history to come. The Elysian Empire came into being as a result of the Nord-assisted victory, with many of its philosophies, traditions, and customs still present in the Third Empire of Skyrim's time, such as guilty until proven innocent. Most significantly, Elysia received the Amulet of Kings and the Dragonfires from Akatosh, and a covenant was made. So long as the Dragonfires shall burn, to you and to all generations, I swear that my heart's blood shall hold fast the gates of oblivion. So long as the blood of the dragon runs strong in her rulers, the glory of the Empire shall extend in unbroken years. But should the Dragonfires fail, and should no heir of our joined blood wear the Amulet of Kings, then shall the Empire descend into darkness, and the demon lords of misrule shall govern the land. While Miraak is said to be the first Dragonborn, Elysia was the first recorded to mainstream history, and the beginning of many Dragonborn emperors who would rule the Empire throughout its various forms over the eras. It was a beginning only possible due to the help of the Nords. Over 2,000 years later, Riemann, who heralded in the Second Empire centuries after the First fell, would be proclaimed Dragonborn by the Akaviri invaders. The Nords were early to pledge themselves to him, but most significant to the Nords is the founding of the Third Empire, which came after the Riemann dynasty, the subsequent Akaviri potentates, and the Interregnum. Tiber Septim, a divine champion of men known by many names, notably Talos Stormcrown of Atmora to the Nords, strengthened a chaotic empire, and united all of Tamriel under one banner, conquering every single province with the help of his battle mage, Zuranactus, and the brass god, the Numidium. In doing so, he brought a great defeat to the elves, especially the High Elves of the Somerset Isles, and ushered in a great and prosperous age of man. Nords hold might, power, conquest, and strength in high esteem. Talos was all these things to the max, a Nord war hero and the leader of the Empire, who the Nords were now fully a part of. He also hated elves, which helps if you're a Nord. In his death, Talos ascended to godhood, though the elves deny that a man can become a god, and more or less replaced Shor for the Nords, a champion god of man. and thus the 8 became 9. Talos has remained a highly revered deity of both the Nords and the Imperials, and began the Septim dynasty, and while it doesn't map onto his DNA perfectly, his line is widely accepted as being full of those blessed with the dragon blood. The Septims ended with Martin's sacrifice at the Temple of the One and Dagon's subsequent defeat. The Oblivion Crisis ended, and according to Martin, the Dragon's Blood and the Amulet of Kings, now shattered, were used to seal the gates of Oblivion forever. The Fourth Era begins with a heavily weakened empire. Many provinces, including Blackmarsh, the Somerset Isles, and elsewhere, would go on to secede from its rule. Former High Counselor Patente Tokato governed the empire for about 15 years after Martin's death, before he was assassinated, after which the 7-year Storm Crown interregnum occurred. It was a time of Elder Council infighting, pretenders to the crown, violent warlords, and fractured leadership. Ultimately, a Colovian warlord, Titus Mede, captured the imperial city from Thuls the Gibbering, a witch warrior, and ushered in a new dynasty, the Mede dynasty, in year 22 of the Fourth Era. This was a rule unaffirmed by divinity, and the dynasty would, at best, find its identity in trying to continue what the Septim Empire had stood for. Under his long rule, Hammerfell was reclaimed, alongside the city-states of Leyawiin and Breville. Morrowind, however, was lost, ravaged by Argonian invasion and the eruption of Red Mountain. The Thalmor, growing in strength, were able to back a coup in Valenwood and see it absorbed into the Third Aldmeri Dominion. This Third Dominion grew in power and influence as the Mede dynasty faced many threats. Many decades later, Titus Mede II would ascend to the throne, and would have to face off against a highly strengthened Aldmeri Dominion only 3 years into his rule. The Great War had begun, and ended in year 175 with the ultimate betrayal. While Titus rejected the Aldmeri Dominion's initial ultimatum, fighting them instead, the Thalmor ultimately claimed the Imperial City. Mede would go on to see himself credited with liberating the Imperial City from the Dominion, winning it back for the Empire in the Battle of the Red Ring. It was at this time that the Redguards of Hammerfell and the Stormcloaks would have wished to see their empire fight on. However, many in the upper ranks of the Empire believed that the Aldmeri Dominion was still too powerful, and to avoid what many Imperials viewed to be their eventual extermination, they signed the White Gold Concordat. The Concordat, among many other conditions, outlawed the worship of Talos, the very man who founded the Empire. Such a heretical action might have been an easy sell to some living in Cyrodiil, but this was not the case for the Nords of Skyrim, who had bled for the cause. Ulfric Stormcloak had fought alongside this empire with fellow Nords such as Rika and Galmar. He had even been captured by the Thalmor during the war, only to escape and continue fighting onwards. Interestingly, Ulfric was, falsely, led to believe that information he gave up during torture led to the fall of the Imperial City. In essence, Ulfric had betrayed the empire he loved so dearly, and arguably his shame over this would greatly ignite his desire for retribution. Whether or not he found out he was lied to later, we can't say, but regardless, the fact that he still caved under pressure may still galvanize his efforts to this day. But all his struggles during the Great War were for naught. The Dominion prevailed, and the Empire bent the knee to the ancient enemy of the Nords, not only militarily, which Nords would see as cowardice anyway, but additionally tore everything they stood for asunder. Their metaphysical brotherhood, all which bonded the Nords to the Empire historically, religiously, culturally, had been spat upon. The Empire's duty to anything outside of pragmatism and survival was sacrificed in the hope of living to fight another day. Again, this video won't be diving into any judgments or morals relating to such a decision. There are arguments that can go either way, but I simply wish to present the cause and effect of it, how the Civil War exists as a result, and how it is based upon betrayal. Around the end of the Great War, the Reachmen had taken Skyrim's city of Markarth, and it was here Ulfric faced his second betrayal.
It all started here, this rebellion. When the Empire lost the Reach during the Great War, we became desperate. We promised a group of Nord militia free worship in exchange for their help retaking the hold. Then the elves found out about it. We were forced to arrest all of them. Ulfric Stormcloak, their leader, used the whole thing as proof that the Empire had abandoned Skyrim. The rebels called it the Markarth Incident. It was the founding day for the Stormcloaks, and where this war really started.
Ulfric was jailed, his very father dying during his imprisonment.
Such is the love of Titus meat for his subjects. When finally set free, I returned to Windhelm and was greeted by a city in mourning, at one with my own grief and anger, clamoring in angry voices, calling out for justice, for war. They sat me on the throne of Ysgramor, the throne of my father. I only hope I can prove worthy of that honor.
Unfortunately for Ulfric, the Markarth incident actually allowed the Thalmor to advance their influence in Skyrim, claiming that the Empire was doing a bad job and making sure its vassals were upkeeping the terms of the treaty. Imagine what it would be like to be a Nord, bleeding for an empire, having friends that died, then returning home to not long after find that the Thalmor are permitted to travel into your lands, setting up embassies and such to ensure you cannot worship your god. It truly is one of the greatest betrayals imaginable. Worse if you've been jailed like Ulfric by your own people after they broke a promise to you to fulfill their end of a deal that would see Talos worship restored. Even worse to realize that your actions allowed the Thalmor to clamp down harder. The twice betrayed Bear of Markarth, too fed up with Skyrim bowing to the demands of the Empire, would go on to slay High King Torygg. He challenged Torygg to a duel in the tradition of the old ways, and used his thumb to defeat him. While many in the Empire would call this a betrayal of its own, staunch Stormcloaks would disagree. Torygg could have refused the duel, but instead took part in it, knowing to refuse would in fact have him viewed in Nord tradition as too weak to rule. Again, I highly recommend watching our Civil War deep dive if you want more of a moral exploration that goes very deep into both sides of the Civil War. But for now, all that matters is that Torygg himself did not find such a challenge to be a crime. Perhaps the real betrayer was the city guard, Rogvir, who let Ulfric escape. You could say his fealty should be to the city first. Oaths can get complicated when they find themselves in a layered hierarchy of conflicting ideals.
By Nord custom, once the challenge was issued in court, Torygg had no choice but to accept. Had he not, Ulfric would have had cause to call a new moot and a new vote for High King. Torygg had some martial training, of course, but it mattered little that day.
Of course, Ulfric knew that his move would force Torygg to fight and therefore die at his hands.
I challenged him in the traditional way, and he accepted. There were many witnesses, no murder was committed. True, he didn't stand a chance against me, but that was precisely the point. He was a puppet king of the Empire, not a high king of Skyrim. His father before him, perhaps, but not Torygg. He was too privileged and too foolish. More interested in entertaining his queen than ruling his country.
Whether or not you like or agree with Ulfric on a personal level, his actions were technically not murder. Torygg simply refused to endure the consequences of being viewed as cowardly. Ultimately, while the moral aspect of the Civil War is mired in subjectivity, it is a string of very provable betrayals that culminated in the war, and the Imperials turning their backs on an age-old alliance with the Nords, and the denial of their founding father, their heroic god, is at the core of it all. With the rebellion breaking out, Skyrim is divided into the old holds of the east and the Empire-aligned holds of the west. The Civil War is obviously a strain on the Empire, on their military, their resources, and even their reputation, and thus the message that betrayal comes back to bite you remains strong. However, an even stronger message would be sent if the Stormcloaks do in fact win. Again, not a moral one on the Civil War itself, but simply that if you betray the old ways, especially betray a god, you're in for a rough ride. A Stormcloak victory would certainly fit a return to tradition theme, a punishment to an empire who betrayed Talos and their Nordic allies, though a new emperor taking charge after the presumed canon assassination of Titus Mede II could equally act to right the wrongs of their predecessors, restoring the empire to glory. We actually made a massive Elder Scrolls 6 design document, which is also linked below, outlining how the Empire and a Stormcloak run Skyrim could feature in the next Elder Scrolls story in an extremely cool way. At least we think so. Skip to the world building section straight away in that video if you're into that. At the end of the day, I do think it's the complexity of the conflict that makes it such an intriguing part of Elder Scrolls lore, still causing heated debates over a decade since Skyrim's release. Now for the honorable mentions, or rather the dishonorable mentions. Chuck as many as you can into the comments, but I'd love to rapid fire a bunch of other moments in Skyrim where the theme of betrayal pops up. Besides breaking your oath to not be a stealth archer, who can forget Arvel the Swift, who after promising to show you how the golden claw he stole works if you free him from a spiderweb, runs away from you instead. On a more serious note, one big oathbreaker is technically Paarthurnax. He was a close ally of Alduin's during his domination of Skyrim, but ultimately turned against him. Now he is harbored by the Greybeards who strongly wish to keep him alive. Paarthurnax has dedicated himself to a peaceful life and to overcoming his inborn dragon instinct for domination.
What is better, to be born good or to overcome your evil nature through great effort?
Here's the big picture. He helped Alduin enslave our ancestors. He may have betrayed Alduin in the end, but that makes him worse, not better. We can't afford to give Paarthurnax the opportunity to betray us in turn and return to his old master. My oath binds me, Dragonborn. Until Paarthurnax is dead, you aren't welcome here.
I find Delphine to be as preachy and annoying as anyone else, and I don't often kill Paarthurnax in my various role-playing focused playthroughs. However, this is a rare example of the Blades really keeping true to their ways and sticking to their guns. Or blades. If the Dragonborn were to kill Paarthurnax, they would be serving him some justice for his past crimes. Also, he does literally tell you that he is tempted to return to his inborn nature every day. With arguments supporting both decisions, it's not exactly black and white, as unpopular as killing him is among fans.
It is always wise to mistrust a Dova.
In My Time of Need is a classic Skyrim dilemma. Sadia, a Redguard from Hammerfell, has supposedly betrayed the Kingdom of Taneth, selling them out to the Aldmeri Dominion. Or so says Kamatu, an Alakir warrior who is looking for her. She will tell you that these Alakir warriors are actually assassins in the employ of the Dominion, and you never find out the truth. Either way, if she did in fact betray her people, handing her over would be another example of betrayers being dealt with in serious ways. Both of them do not appear to be telling the full truth though. There are some holes in both stories when explored in depth. Jari Ra, the Argonian who approaches you in solitude for the Lights Out quest, while upfront about the immoral nature of the task at hand, ultimately betrays you. There's no honor among thieves, I suppose. Or killers. Maybe they should have stayed true to their plan they agreed upon and simply given you your cut of the loot. There are undoubtedly many examples of betrayal in the Daedric Prince quests. Malakath's quest features the Orc chief Yamaz. Once strong and proud, he has become weak and cowardly due to a curse. The giants sense this and intrude on their territory, according to Atub. To redeem him, Malakath sends Yamaz to Giant's Grove, where he must kill the Giant's leader and return with his club as an offering. Yamaz, not true to the ways of Malakath and not fulfilling his duty as being a strong leader for his tribe, tries to pay you to kill the giant. If you convince him to do it, he is killed by the giant instantly. But if you help him, he actually betrays you after, not wanting others to know the truth of what happened. Either way, you or the giant slays him, and Malakath is pleased that this weakling was brought to justice.
Yamaz was a fool, always trying to scheme his way out of responsibility. But you took care of him and the giants. 2 problems solved at once.
Mafala's quest can see the last Dragonborn get a hold of her ebony blade, and if they so choose, restore its power with the blood of treachery. You're literally told to use it to kill friends, though there's not much justice to be found here, just a confirmation of Mafala's sphere. Vaemina's quest is very interesting due to Aranda's character. Now trying to atone for his past mistakes, he has turned to Mara, but in his previous life, he was not only a priest of Vaemina, the Daedric prince of dreams and nightmares, but he betrayed his fellow priests by leaving them in stasis after activating the miasma when the orc invaders showed up. Consider that this gas is very dangerous if you're exposed to it for long periods of time, which they were. It can cause one to lose their mind.
You're a traitor. You left us to die and then ran before the miasma took you. No, I was scared. I wasn't ready to sleep. I knew Varen and Thoric. They were my friends. Is this punishment for my past? Is it Mara's will to torment me so?
Additionally, if you listen to Vaemina and kill him, he certainly receives extra punishment for betraying her. Perhaps you should. He is actually deceitful to the Dragonborn, despite now turning to Mara, which is something we explore in this video linked below. Malyn Varen was never Azura's devout follower, however he did mess with her star, killing a fellow College of Winterhold member in the process, and ultimately met his death at the last Dragonborn's hands. Boethiah's quest requires you to kill someone loyal to you, so there's betrayal in that respect, and then you have to kill her current champion who has actually renounced his loyalty to her. He's aggressive, so many people don't know this, but if you calm him with magic, he'll actually tell you this.
I'm slave to no man, no god, and no Daedra. Boethiah talks about leaving your mark, a sign of your passing. Well, you can make a mark on the world without treachery and murder. Whenever a man's life is saved by armor made with these hands have changed that man's destiny and his family's. So you can tell that heartless Daedra bitch I'm done doing her dirty work.
Hircine's quest features Sinding, who stole the Ring of Hircine from the Daedric Prince of the Hunt, only for his plan to backfire after Hircine cursed the ring in response. You can enact vengeance for this betrayal, or if you're nice, spare him, after which he decides he will have to make his home in Bloated Man's Grotto, away from anyone he might hurt. Molag Bal's quest starts out in Markarth in a spooky abandoned house that Bal will influence in a very intimidating way. He actually causes the once righteous Tyrannus, a vigilant of Stendarr who wishes to stamp out evil, to betray his own morals. Fear breaks him, and he attacks you as Molag demands, meeting his end as a result. Peryite also has you take down Orchendor, an elf who betrayed him. Originally, Orchendor was sent to gather those afflicted by a plague Peryite sent to a scattering of Breton villages.
Well done, mortal. All things are in their order, and Orchendor roams the pits. His betrayal will be punished, and your obedience is rewarded.
To think this doesn't even cover every traitor in Skyrim. Characters like Gulamai and Elaine Defont come to mind, but we have to end somewhere. So what did Todd mean by all this? Well, there's clearly some sort of oddly persistent message that one should stay true to their word regardless of who it's to. There's also a strong pro-tradition, pro-god type of sentiment there, though understandably, gods are, by their nature, superior entities, and thus defying them is bound to end badly. I also find it interesting that there's not many ways to roleplay outside of this message. For example, you must become a Nightingale to right the wrongs of Mercer Frey, you must become the Listener to help the Night Mother and return the guild to tradition, and of course I mean if you choose to join the guild. While you can remain a werewolf, you're then sworn to Hircine, though perhaps that's just showing how much of an oathbreaker the Dragonborn can end up. Sworn to all gods, leader of morally opposed guilds. Eventually the promises add up, and technically I'm not sure you can keep them all, or if as Dragonborn that all the afterlife related ones would even affect you. That all aside, it's not usually canon in retrospect that the hero protagonist of each game is the exact person who completes all the guild storylines. What does seem to feel canon to me at least is that the last Dragonborn acts as a vessel to punish those who have abandoned their duties to Akatosh or other analogues of him. Thank you so much for tuning in. Seriously, it really means a lot. If you like content like this, please do consider supporting us on Patreon if you can afford it. Please put more examples of betrayers being punished in the comments, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.